our team, we have March Madness. We had our brackets going, and some people aren't into basketball, but it's even just the jersey colors or mascots. Who knows how they're choosing things, but it's at least that conversation. So I think the one thing I found interesting with COVID was I felt like that was the one thing missing that could bring people together, even when they're self-isolated. And that was one thing I think was missing for a while when things were shut down. And it was good to see that come back, because you saw some of that togetherness come back in terms of connection and conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I think that was actually one of the probably key things that helped sports betting get national attention.
Yeah.
Was because all of a sudden there was nothing to watch but the headlines across, whatever CBS or NBC or Fox or whatever you watch in the morning. We're talking about how people were betting on like international ping pong matches. And that's like it. Everybody like craves sports, right? You don't think about it in the middle of June or something or whatever, pre-NBA playoffs, and when baseball is just kind of like in the middle ground of people establishing themselves. Like, you don't think about it if you can go to a baseball game or a basketball game or whatever it might be. But when they're not there, it's like you don't know what you've got until it's gone. Sports moments happen every day, right? You were just talking about March Madness, the upsets, right? Or the draft is a couple of weeks away. If you follow any of the news right now, it's where does Trevor Lawrence go? Where does Fields go? What happened? There was just a big trade last week with the 49ers. These moments, these conversations happen all the time. What happens is sports media grabs those headlines, they push them out at fans. Fans form opinions. They put those opinions into text conversations, into Slack conversations, into WhatsApp conversations. And then ultimately, based on the output or the outcome of those moments, lines and spreads change on the sports books. But right now, those are siloed environments. Those three things are happening. There's data that's not being passed across them. And so they're really not connected in any way, shape, or form. Pickup's whole perspective is to converge those three things, is to create an ecosystem where when headlines happen, fans can engage with them. They can share that content into their fan conversations. They can grab an article, they can grab a headline, they can share it. When they make a pick, it's quantified because it's actually tracked and it's something that lives in your digital portfolio of picks. And then if you want to make it a real money wager, we just pass you through to the sportsbook to go ahead and make it a real money wager. And so our perspective is you need to enable fans to get credit for being right, to be held accountable for being wrong, and to help educate them on the fact that from now on, you can always be, like your picks are always worth something, right? And not just like internal, like, hey, I knew that was going to happen, but you can actually track them and be right for it. So the technology that we built, what it allows us to do is it allows us to tap into like those subreddit groups, right? Or those Twitter conversations or the RSS feeds that Gopher fans are talking about or Vikings fans are talking about. We pull those headlines out, those conversations out. We turn them into quantifiable props, right? Did the Vikings draft an offensive lineman in the first round, right? Will Big Ten have a full season? Will the Big Ten allow fans in? That sort of stuff. That's what people are talking about right now in those groups. And then our publishing partners, who range from Xfinity, who publishes these props on the TV in some capacity, to USA Today, to hyperlocal, like Full Scale Philly or 49ers Hive or Bear Down Blog or any of those, to just grab these props and put them on their content. And when they put them on their content, the pickup site aggregates all of it back so that if a fan wants to, they can just click into playpickup.com, they can go to NFL and just make picks on all of the things that matter to them, share them with their community, and then ultimately convert the points they win to Fanatics gift cards or Hyper Ice or Bolero gift cards or stuff like that.
That's great. So you founded Pickup, and then comes March 2020. Everything's canceled. We've talked a little bit about that, but how did that work when it was such a tumultuous time, like trying to build the company while it was so with all of the unknown uncertainty that was happening?
Yeah, it was hard. So just to give a little bit, I think, of clarity around where we were as a company. In the middle of February, we received a term sheet for our seed round of financing, and it came from this incredible group, a group called KB Partners, and we were planning on closing the round in late March, and then we were pretty much there. We had all the commitments we needed. And then, the market dropped out. It was something like the 21st of March. It was right around there. It was about maybe it might have even been earlier because I think I was still in the city. But the market dropped out, and we lost some angel investors that, just saw like a large portion of their net worth dissipate overnight. And the big conversation was like, are sports going to come back? Are they going to play? And to be honest, we for a minute we were a little bit scared, and we started to look at esports, which wasn't going to stop and clearly had upside. But then we looked at our product and we looked at our thesis, and our whole mentality, everything that we do is driven by headlines, and headlines aren't going to stop, right? Headlines will not stop. A lot of the headlines that we just talked about still have COVID related questions, right? And they still, like, we have gamified headlines, and there were more sports headlines, and sports media got more attention last year and over the past year than it has in a very long time. And so we pushed forward, and we let our investors know that was our take, and that's how it's going to go. The KB folks, they doubled down. Drive by DraftKings invested, and we had a couple of other angels that also saw that step up. And we ended up closing an oversubscribed round at the end of April. So it was one of those moments where, sure, like when the world stopped, it was like getting punched in the face. Yeah. And we got back up, and we just said, that's okay. We were prepared for this. We've thought about not this specifically, but we thought about trends in the direction we're going, and our tech still works, and our platform still makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. It's amazing to hear all the different stories that are out there for what happened, how things, transpired, and then where people ended up. So it's great to hear that it ended on a good note, obviously even better than expected. And when you're laying on the ground, punched in the face, you never know what's going to happen when you get back up. So it's good to hear that it went that direction. So yeah. According to CBS and Turner Sports, and the Sweet 16 had the best viewership in nearly 30 years. So kind of what you were just saying in regards to, everyone's watching sports. It's one of the only things. It was that or Tiger King, right? It was like for a period of time that you heard about, right? So fans are just wanting to feel part of the game. A lot of them can't be there in person. Kind of depends on the state you're in, depends on the teams and the different leagues, right? And what their rules are right now. So with that, and so many people working from home and taking sports in from the couch, how does that affect pickup, usership, and adoption? I know you talked a little bit about it, but do you want to expand a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So one of the trends that we saw in the very early days, as you had recalled, was that conversations are becoming more digital, right? The conversations that people used to have in the venues, right, in the stands at a baseball game, at the bar, at the class, all of those conversations are becoming more digital. And even if they are still or start to again take place in a physical location, they won't count unless they're tracked in some capacity. And there's been a whole shift in people thinking about tracking their portfolio and getting credit for things. And that's why social media exists the way it exists. And that's why platforms are starting to, and we can go down the NFT path a little bit later if you'd like to. But that's a trend that we're seeing. And so as people start to go back, they will still want to engage digitally. It's no different from what we saw in 19 or the first part of 20, right? If you looked at a group of people at a Nets game in the first part of 2020, in February of 2020, 70% were on their phone, right? And they were doing something, whether it was watching a different game or posting a picture or whatever it might be. That has been exasperated because it's much more relevant to be sitting there with 3 screens on and 3 different games and then looking at your phone and saying how your bets are doing or your picks are doing or whatever. But it will continue to go that way, whether in person or not. And people are just looking for tools. Like they're just looking for tools to make it a better experience, to make the fan engagement component more, I think, satisfying, but also to be a part of the thing that they're seeing.